Recently, Ford Motor Company brought back 350 engineers, humans, because the AI process they had in place was not leading to the standards that Ford wanted in vehicles coming off their assembly line. Starbucks went away from AI powered app for its inventory system because too many mistakes were happening. Santiago Gallino is a professor of operations, information, and decisions here at the Wharton School. And he joins us to try and explain why that could be developing a gap in the process in the retail sector in using AI. Santiago, great to talk to you again. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Very good to see you then.
It's interesting because so many people thought AI was going to be the panacea, make everything work perfectly. Companies would probably be able to cut cost as well, but we're seeing, at least in retail, that there are some of these instances where maybe it doesn't run as perfect as a lot of people expected.
Yes. I think that that's what we're seeing now, and I think in part is a natural evolution of these new technologies. I think many companies are moving from experimentation to implementation, and I think this reminds me of a phrase by Yogi Berra that in theory there is no difference between practice and theory, but in practice there is. And I think that companies are seeing that firsthand, and I think it's a natural evolution, and it's good to see that companies are trying and learning.
You mentioned in the article that recently ran about Starbucks and the changes they made. Take us through the problems that they had, because I think for a company like Starbucks, the last thing they want to have happen is something like inventory end up impacting how their employees work, but also the downstream impact that probably occurs with the customer that would also occur as well.
Yes, so I think it's an interesting example because it shows a couple of I guess red lights or things that companies should think carefully about when rolling out these technologies. If you're an outsider to the retail industry, you might not be aware that inventory accuracy is not a trivial problem. You will assume that every retailer knows perfectly well the number of units of each SKU in the store, in the work. And that is not the case. And not because these companies don't try really hard. It's because it's a very difficult part of the process to keep track of. Companies make a lot of investments and efforts. And so I will say it's not surprising that Starbucks tried to bring technology to this specific step. Now, the challenge is that accuracy in this particular case matters a lot. And so I think that inaccuracies in the count of inventory, inaccuracy on the feed that is informing now the forecasting algorithms can escalate very quickly. With the additional point, which I think many of the articles and conversation with store managers highlight, is that it creates a negative loop because the moment that the employees learn that the technology cannot be fully trusted because it's inaccurate and making mistakes, then the employees start to put less effort in implementing the tool correctly, start to send wrong signals, and that start to spiral out and making the whole process fail.
So I mentioned the case with Ford Motor Company. To see a company like Ford bring on AI into their assembly process and not get the results that they wanted to get, mistakes happen, and them have to bring back human engineers, it really does talk to that component of how humans are still going to be important, even with AI kind of in the mix.
Absolutely, and I think it's a kind of an effort for from managers to understand what AI is really about. And I think that because of the excitement and the hype and the inflated expectations, I think there was and there still is around the misunderstanding of what AI can and cannot do. And I think that these kind of pendulum between going all in and coming back with the human AI collaboration is a healthy exercise. And I think that we should not land hard on companies like Starbucks or Ford Motor Companies in the sense that I think it is a risk not to experiment, not to try to learn.
Right.
At the same time, it's like, well, how fast, how quickly can we scale? Have we done the exercise of going through the process in detail before throwing in a technology that, as we all know, is still very much evolving?
So the companies really, to a degree, were so excited by the technology and the potential of what it could bring. They maybe jumped into the water with both feet a little too quick, correct?
Yes, and I think it is also a conversation internally at the organization of what is this technology actually bringing
Mhm.
to the process and to the customer ultimately. And in the case of Ford Motor Company, you can imagine that quality mistakes in the car can be an extremely risky proposition. It's
Right,
not that you got the wrong drink at Starbucks, easy to fix, not a big deal.
right.
If you start to have errors in the process when you make a car that cause accidents, now we are at a different league. And I think that's also an important consideration when you think about what to scale and where AI at this stage can bring value. So is the process benefiting from it? Is the customer valuing this technology in one way or another?
Well, doesn't that also go to the question of brand? And it's something that I know that marketing professors and marketers have looked at a lot in the last few years, how companies are more focused on brand than ever before. And when you
Mhm.
have these mistakes, and as you mentioned with Starbucks, an issue with the stocking and having the right amount of product in place has an impact on the customer, or I should say, on the employee. It could potentially have a downstream impact on the customer, and the customer gets a negative feel for it, and they don't maybe go back to Starbucks as often as they may have normally done.
Absolutely, and I think that failures in the process, failure in the product, failure in the experience are always going to have an impact on the brand and the willingness of the customer to visit again. I think it's also important to recognize that for the most part, customers are not going to reward you for bringing fancy new technology to the store. Like
Right,
you can think of Trader Joe's as an example. I mean, they use bells to send signals inside the store. One bell, I need one more cashier. Two bells, I need the store manager. Three bells, and everyone is happy with that. I think it's an idea that we need technology when it's needed. Are
right.
the bells a good solution for the Joe? Absolutely. They have a footprint of the store that allows for that. If you want to ring bells at Costco, it will be a problem because you're not going to listen to that everywhere in the store like you can do at Trader Joe's. So it's a combination of like the right solution, the right technology, and what the customers is actually going to value from that technology in the store.
So which is more important than in that entire process? And I assume it is the recognition of the managers, the company, of what the expectation needs to be of just how much you can gain from having AI in the process.
Yes, and I think that if we think about the steps we were talking before about experimentation moving into implementation, I think when you make that transition, the next step is okay. What is the return on investment here?
Right.
Because all this investment, technology more broadly, AI in particular, they are not for free.
Right.
And I think that that consideration comes to play, especially when you roll out these technology at scale, they start not to give you the expected results. And I think that is, I think, the third step in the evolution of these implementations: experimentation, implementation, and then looking for the value these technologies are actually creating.
So has the value of return on investment changed then within these companies because of the dynamic of AI? Is that is it as important to companies as it has been in the past?
So I think when I talk to companies, you can recognize, I guess, two main camps. ones that are kind of almost arguing for a FOMO effect, like we cannot be out of this. We need to go all in. Eventually, we'll figure it out
Right.
how this is paying itself, which this is my personal take. I think is not the right approach. I think other companies are constantly experimenting, learning what is out there, and trying to align those investments and learnings to their strategy, and then making a commitment and a decision that is consistent with the overall strategy of the company. And this, I mean, can vary a lot even within an industry like retail. Like not
Yeah.
every technology is for every retailer.
Santiago, great to talk to you today. Thanks very much for your time. All the best. Thank you. Santiago Gallino, professor of operations, information, and decisions here at the Wharton School.